All right, what's up, everybody? I just wanted to further elaborate on what I shared in my first PowerPoint, which I'm gonna render a little bit. I've added a lot of slides to it to bring more clarity to, what I was talking about. But within this Black Indigenous community, a lot of people within the Black Indigenous community have said that there is a connection between the ancient Maya and Egypt. And I found a video from some gentlemen that I'm going to share. Um, and I don't want to let the cat out the bag too soon. I want to, lead you all up to it, add some suspense to it. But they found an interesting finding in in Egypt, but first, I want to lay some groundwork because in the last, PowerPoint presentation, I mentioned that I believe that so-called African American DNA is more, affinity. That's a word. I think that's a word. They share more affinity with um, the ancient Nile DNA than Bantu expansion, and that's supported by genetic studies as well. So I mentioned that in the last PowerPoint. I want to further elaborate, you know, uh, and put some receipts out there. I have this posted on the screen right now, and so what I believe happened. I think there, despite the fact that the E1B1A is shared by so-called African Americans and modern West Africans, what have you. I believe that the population group they are at least not identical, if not completely different. And I believe that the current modern West African population is a product of Bantu expansion, and I believe that the so-called African Americans are more closely related to that of the Nile, and I also believe that that bloodline entered the Nile from ancient America, and we are not the only ones who have been saying this, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate later. But yes, I believe that that bloodline entered the Nile from um, ancient America. So first, I want to set the groundwork for the fact that Ramses III tested positive for YAP. So that was the first um, that was the first finding in Ramses, and so of course they narrowed it down to the E haplogroup, and so they were trying to determine whether it was E1B1B or E1B1A, and so they started leaning towards um, the E1B1A. And so here in this blog post right here, you can clearly see that it says Ramses the third belonged to Y-DNA haplogroup E1B1A. They give their reasoning for it. Let me go to it. They give their reasoning for it. It's a lot of scientific, jargon in here, but I just want to get straight to the point for the purposes of this video. You can see here it says plugging these numbers in with Athie's predictor does indeed indicate that this haplogroup E1B1A with 99.1% probability using equal priors. The decisive DYS to judge between E1B1A and E1B1B is DYS 390. With the exclusion of DYS 390, his haplotype belongs to 83.7% E1B1B and 15.8% E1B1A. However, it is well known that the DYS 390 equals 21 is a high probability signature for West Central Southern Africa, i.e., the E1B1A dominates. So I just wanted to establish that. So yes, their determination was E1B1A, and this is further backed by. I want to put this on the screen. Stop sharing there. Let's cancel the video. So I've stopped sharing there. Now I want to bring up the other article concerning an African American by the name of Dexter Caffey. And you can clearly see that there. Get that off my screen. You can see what he looks like. All right. I'm going to play the video.
And we're now very happy to be joined by our next guest, Dexter Caffey, the founder of Smart Eye app, who recently learned of an eye-opening discovery of his own ancient past, all thanks to a DNA test. He is joining us now by Zoom from Atlanta. Hello, Dexter.
Hello, Emily. How are you?
It's so good to see you. Last time was here in Israel. We got to get you back here, but we'll have to settle for Zoom now. You have such an interesting history. Please explain what made you do a DNA test, and then what happened when you found out all of a sudden that you're related to Ramses III.
That's a great question, Emily. Well, about a year and a half ago, I traveled to places like Israel, France, and different places like that. And so what happened was people would always ask a normal question, where are you from? And I would say the States, United States. And the people that I saw in France would say, no, where are you really from? And I said, the States. That's all I know. And so that question stuck with me for a long time. And I just said, where am I actually from? I mean, I know I'm American, but where my DNA is from? And so I said, well, let me take my DNA test. It was a 23andMe DNA test. And I took the test, and I was shocked when I saw the results. It came back, and it showed that I was actually a direct descendant of the Pharaoh Ramses III. And I knew nothing of the pharaohs. Didn't know much about Egypt, but everything you hear about, Bible stories and things like that. So for me, it was a huge shock, and that's how I found out about it.
Wow. So obviously you took it deeper and deeper.
So I just want to pause there. I've criticized consumer DNA companies before, saying that they're unreliable. But in this case, at least we have some type of, genetic proof outside of consumer DNA companies. That's the only reason why I'm respecting it. They've already found that Ramses III was YAP positive and confirmed E1B1A with high probability. So now when you follow up with Ancestry 23 and you find out that it's related, this gentleman is related directly within that lineage, then, that probability, in my opinion, becomes much higher than, but anyway, let's continue with the video.
You saw all of these synchronicities in looking at images of the pharaoh, how much you and even your brother look like them, and your own company has like an eye logo that looks like the Eye of Horus, unconnected to any of this. So what did this open up for you in terms of your own knowledge and learning about this?
I remember I was actually laying in my bed on Christmas Day, 2021, and I was going through my 23andMe DNA test, and that's when I saw that I was connected to the Pharaoh Ramses III. And again, I knew nothing of this situation. And so I looked up a sculpture of the Pharaoh Ramses III, and when I saw the sculpture, I literally screamed. And my wife said, Dexter, what's wrong? I said, this guy from 4,000 years ago, we look just alike. And she said, Dexter, wait a minute. There were no pictures from 4,000 years ago. I said, no, his sculpture was the Pharaoh Ramses III. His sculpture, we look like identical twins. And she said, let me see it. She saw it. She said, oh, my goodness. And then I continued to go over different sculptures, looking online. And I saw the sculpture that looked just like my brother. If you could show that on the screen, it'd be absolutely amazing. But it was, and I looked at the sculpture and I said, this looks just like my brother Joe. And I called my brother Joe and I said, I'm going to send you something. And he said, where'd you get that from? It looks just like me. I said, that's a sculpture of the Pharaoh Ramses III. And he said, oh my God, just like me. I said, that's a sculpture of the Pharaoh Ramses. And I called my brother Joe.
I missed it. Let me go back.
This looks just like my brother Joe. And I
There we go. So not only do so-called African Americans share the lineage, they still distinctly show the phenotype. Often do African Americans, at least myself, or so-called African Americans, say that we don't look anything like the majority of modern West Africans. But here you can see that in this Nile Valley civilization, we see the phenotypical matches. I'm not saying that no West Africans show any type of resemblance with us, but generally speaking, I would say that they don't. The women might share more affinity than the men do, because the female lineage is much older than the men. But anyway, you can see the strong resemblance here. I just wanted to point that out.
called my brother Joe and said, I'm going to send you something. And he said, where'd you get that from? It looks just like me. I said, that's a sculpture of the Pharaoh Ramses III. And he said, oh my God, I said, that's over 4,000 years old and looks identical, just like you. So we were blown away, completely blown away.
And talk about the synchronicities. It's funny how, the universe speaks to us. So you have a company that with the eye is a logo. You even have a dog that's similar to the dogs of Pharaoh. What?
Oh yeah.
As I kept digging more and more, I had a friend who's here in the States. He's from Israel, and he said, Dexter, he said, your logo that you have for your company, the eye that you started like over 4 years ago, looks just like the logo from the Pharaoh Ramses III. I said, what are you talking about? What did they have? And they had the Eye of Horus. And I looked at it, I said, oh my goodness, they had an eye as their logo, and my company's logo was an eye. And again, keep in mind, Emily, I found this out about a year ago. But I had my company established for over 4 years before that, my startup. And so I just kept continuing. I said, this is crazy. We actually have the same image, logo. And so I kept digging further, and I found out that they had dogs called the Pharaoh Hound, which is in the same family as the dogs that I own called Whippets, which are.
So there you go. I mean, come on, people. You guys could call us wobbles or whatever words you guys want to make up for us. You know what I mean? But the truth is coming out, and it will prevail. Best believe that. You see this gentleman looks almost identical to this the statue here, and this will also indicate that if the E1B1A, if he shares this, the direct lineage, which he does, obviously, then that will also obviously mean that the whole Ramses lineage is E1B1A. You know what I mean? That would just be common sense. But this would go against the common narrative of so-called African Americans being in the Nile with a very low frequency presence. That to me needs to be revisited, because if it was such a low presence, then it should have been no way that that lineage should have made it into the Pharaoh bloodline, which it did, and that's been confirmed. So again, what we're saying is being confirmed by genetic evidence now. So this whole thing about being wobbles, wannabe culture vultures, you guys think that you're everything. We literally are. So let's continue.
Hounds. So they run just as fast, chase small prey. That's what they were bred for. So, and then I continued to look at it further, and I said, wait a minute, what was the Pharaoh Ramses III's name? When I actually looked it up, it was, they had different names, of course, but the name was Seti, S-E-T-I, Seti number 2. That was the Pharaoh Ramses III name. Seti number 1 was his father, the one that was the fought against Moses and the let my people go situation. So Seti number 2 was Pharaoh Ramses III. And I said, wait a minute, my company's name is actually Smart Eye Technology Incorporated. If you take the first letters, Smart Eye Technology Incorporated, it comes out to SETI. That blew my mind. I said, this is insane. So everything connected. And I'll never forget, Emily, my first trip to Israel in 2015, I went to the Negev Desert, and I felt so comfortable in a Negev Desert. I remember saying to myself, I feel like I could live here. But when I did more research, I found out that the Pharaoh Ramses III spent years in the Negev desert trading. So again, these are all things I'm learning, and I felt like so much at home, and I just realized why.
Wow, it's incredible. So obviously you're still on your learning journey of, what this all
I'm
means. But
gonna
what is
end
it
that
like to kind of
part
be?
of it there, and I want to get into this other video that's very supportive of what I've been pointing out with the Mayan and Egyptian connection. This is very important to connect. So I'm gonna stop sharing this here, and I'm gonna bring up this other video. And I'm gonna rewind it back to the top. All right, so dodge the hijack on this image. We know that the original Mayan people did not look like this. They were heavy melanated with woolly hair. But this is this is the classical rendition that we see. So but like I said, we're gonna dodge that hijack there. And with that said, let's get into this video so I can complete this connection here.
Absolute special access. Today we get to enter the tomb of Maya. Stephen, please.
Well, this is a chapel or temple of Maya. Now, Maya was a title, not a name, of both men and women throughout dynastic times. This particular era is around the 18th dynasty, the time of the so-called King Horemheb. Now, the key thing here is 1997, Hakim came to the United States, to California. He and my research partner, Bob Butter, and I met him for a couple of weeks, and we discussed. One of the things he discussed on a return trip to Egypt in September of 1997 would be, he said, he would show us evidence of a Mayan temple in Egypt.
Mayan as in culture.
Exactly. And I said, this I never heard of. No, it's not in any text. No, it's.
So you heard the man clearly. Mayan temple in Egypt. So just so you know, it's not just coming from us. And he's going to show you exactly what he's talking about.
Okay, we came here. This was arranged differently then. A lot of this is new construction. It was not this way in 1997. First of all, I looked on the wall. Behind you, you see that is Maya, but he looks typically Commission.
Right.
And I'm looking around, typically commissioned, all the looks. So Hakim would use the expression, well, Stephen, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. He's living in Kemet, he's going to pass in Kemet, so he's portraying himself as a Commission. So I said, well, Papa, this is great, but I can't go with this in front of an academic audience. They'll laugh me off the stage. There's nothing here to identify with the culture we're talking about. But then there was a keeper like this gentleman here, was here, didn't speak any English, but saw that I was perplexed. He said, come here. This then was boarded up with just a wooden door. And there was latches there. He threw away the wooden slabs, opened the door, and he said, look up. And that is the key. Took a picture in 1997, sent it to my...
Let me pause that so everybody can see that clearly. All right. Let's keep it going.
And Daykeeper Hanbat's men. He said he recognizes this as the language of the Itza people, whereas Chichen Itza, he said, is an ancient language. But a lot of people are not sure about Hanbat's men. So we went one step further. In 2010, I got to meet Don Alejandro Sul Ojaj. He is the wisdom keeper, the head of the Quiche Maya of all of Guatemala. I showed him this picture, and his eyes went as big as saucers. And he said to me, that is the language of my ancestors. That is a calendar. That is telling the date of when Maya was here. And how we can't read it, he can't even still read it, but he knows that the circles and squares and different colors, arrangements, and the spokes in the wheel are indications of a date. So, this has never been discussed by any Egyptologist. They cannot put this in a Commission context. There is nothing, or maybe there is others that Yusuf has seen, but there's nothing like this in the rest of Egypt. So, Mayan elders recognize this as part of their culture. So now the key is, Maya, the word is a title. Men and women had the title. Very interesting because we've talked about the difference between Egyptian Arabic and other Arabic. In Egypt, one of the key words for water is Maya. It is not pronounced the same way in any other Arabic country. If you went to Saudi Arabia, they would say Ma or Meh. Only in Egypt is it pronounced Maya. And it means water. So I asked Hakim, could the title Maya actually have meant he who came from across the water, or ones who came from across the water? He said, yes. So here is what we call diffusionism archaeology, diffusionism anthropology, saying that there had to be cultural contact between these individuals thousands of miles across the sea. And this is the evidence that Hakim told us that there was a Mayan living in Egypt 3,300 years ago. Let somebody else define that for me and tell me that that is Cometian or Egyptian or dynastic or anything else.
So yes, there you have it. That would have been the 18th dynasty. That would have been before the Ramses lineage. Actually, let me see now. I'm not sure about that. That might have been the beginning of the Ramses lineage. I had to go research that and verify that. That'll be something interesting to figure out. Matter of fact, I'm gonna just use ChatGPT real quick on the phone and verify this information real quick, and then we'll know what dynasty did Ramses one rule in. Okay, so his rule began in the 19th dynasty. So he would have been right after. So, but the timelines are still, matching up. We got the Mayan civilization in ancient Kemet in the 18th dynasty, and then we see the E1B1A in ancient Kemet right after. So I'm just saying, we not just pulling this out of the air and just making it up. We have substantial reasons to believe what we believe, and again, I find it very, what's the word? Very hard to believe that the lineage in E1B1A just sat there kind of between, the Nile and Central West Africa for roughly about 15,000 years with no movement, and then all of a sudden it booms with the Bantu expansion. To me, that's obviously two different population groups that share the same lineage. Now, how that happened, I'll still have to research and figure out how that lineage, got into this hunter-gatherer group that expanded. So, and but anyway, I think, based on the evidence that we're starting to see in the timelines, something is just not making sense. I think they're trying to. I think the powers that be are trying to convolute the bloodline possessed within so-called African Americans with another bloodline to basically deceive so-called African Americans into believing a different historical narrative for themselves. But I find that very hard to believe that these two are of the same population groups. I'm not buying that, And as I presented in the last or my first PowerPoint, that African Americans do not share structure with at least modern Africans. And like I said, I'm gonna render that. I'm gonna add some more stuff to that, some more slides to that to bring that, make that even more clear with more um, quotes from articles, geneticists, and things like that. But I'm gonna conclude this right here. I think this was a pretty good presentation here to lay a lot of groundwork for what the community believes and why we believe it. And that's it.